rigorous policy process filled with experts on the Middle East and come up with this proposal. There is no way you could get from there to where we now are.
And Mika, as we see these images here, the devastation in Gaza, 15 months of conflict, but this is still home to 2.2 million people. And Donald Trump is talking about displacement on just a staggering scale.
I've heard a lot of different words about this, but the ones that stand out to me is this is impossible, this will never happen, maybe he doesn't mean it. And I would like to try and put a pause on that thinking to an extent, because I think we've learned by now, and a lot of what we talked about here on Morning Joe during the campaign is Donald Trump does mean it. He means it. This is a man who said during the campaign he would pardon January 6 rioters, and he has done so. This is a man who said that he would be your retribution and threatened retribution to people who worked on cases against him. That is happening right now in the FBI. Let's stop surmising as to whether or not he means it, because he means it. Okay, so Mark Polymeropoulos, my question to you is, what will the promotion of this idea do to the delicate state of affairs?
Right, Mika, and so I think every CIA station chief in the Middle East woke up this morning with a migraine headache, because there's a potential for a generational counterterrorism nightmare here. You have to look at the words that Donald Trump used yesterday, quote, take over Gaza, own Gaza. These are triggering mechanisms for Islamic extremist groups. Remember, Osama bin Laden's biggest beef with the United States decades ago was the U.S. troop presence in Saudi Arabia. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, same thing, the insurgency based on U.S. troops in Iraq. So this kind of language only is going to galvanize groups that want to kill Americans. And if I was in the CIA and is still in the CIA and the counterterrorism community, I'd be monitoring the Islamic extremist forums, because this is just a tremendous own goal. And I worry that even if these are just words, as Richard said, perhaps part of some strange negotiating gambit, Americans might be less safe now. And I can't imagine anybody in the CIA or the State Department who would have advocated this approach.
Talk about the ceasefire agreement in place. I mean, there are hostages still due to come home. We're watching these reunions. They're incredibly emotional. I know President Trump is very much into seeing these reunions and positive things like that happening, hoping to take credit for them and things like that. What could these comments and this intention do to the ceasefire agreement that's in place right now?
Sure, Mika, because there's a delicate balance that's going on right now, and we're trying to get through this phase one, perhaps to get to phase two, but there are still hostages who need to be released. And so if you're Hamas right now and you hear these comments, how do you, even if there was some, distrust in the past, but how do you see the U.S. as an interlocutor that you can agree with when they're saying all of the Palestinians have to be removed from the Gaza Strip with all of this kind of fanciful language? So, even this kind of strange rhetoric from Trump could really alter a very delicate negotiating pattern right now, which has seen hostages released. More are supposed to come this weekend. We'll see.
All right, NBC News security and intelligence analyst Mark Polymeropoulos, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. Let's go live to Tel Aviv, Israel. NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vasugan is standing by there. Yasmin, what's the reaction that you're hearing so far?
I think, Mika, it's important to be frank about the situation here in the Middle East. And it feels as if President Trump has literally dropped a nuclear bomb on the Middle East. Lemire is right in that Donald Trump campaigned on getting the United States out of foreign wars. It feels as if, after yesterday evening, standing aside Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, that Donald Trump may very well have gotten the United States into another war. This is the type of rhetoric that will unite, that can feasibly unite the Middle East, right? We have heard from MBS of Saudi Arabia denouncing what Donald Trump has said. We have heard, obviously, from Islamic militants, from the Palestinian Authority to Islamic Jihad to Hamas, who have all understandably denounced what Donald Trump has said. We have heard Iran denouncing what Donald Trump has said. Even from Egypt and the foreign minister, not necessarily directly addressing but instead saying we will continue to rebuild Gaza. As Richard mentioned, we know that the Jordanian king will be heading to Washington on February 11th. The president of Egypt heading to Washington Thursday as well. Obviously, Donald Trump wanting to bring key players to try and put this plan into motion. But across the Middle East, there is a real deep dissatisfaction and anger with what President Trump is proposing. And yet, if you look to the right wing of the Israeli government, they in fact are celebrating this notion of the United States taking over Gaza. But it's the Israeli citizens that I've spoken to here in Tel Aviv and the Palestinians in Gaza, who our team on the ground have spoken to as well, who also think this idea is real lasting peace. Let's take a listen to them, Mika, and then we'll talk on the other side.
We can't leave our homes. How dare you say you should leave your homes? We can't. This is Palestine, and we Palestinians are the only ones who have the right to live here and never to leave it.
We will never leave our town. Palestine for us, this is never changing.
I mean, the people live there. There is Gazan civilians who lives in Gaza. I don't understand the idea of just taking over.
Richard is right, is that it feels as if Donald Trump is forgetting about history. One of the reasons why Hamas, Mika, came into power in 2006 is because Hamas essentially promised infrastructure, right? They promised schooling, they promised food, they promised aid. The person, the people, the organizations, the country that will win the hearts and minds, for instance, of the Palestinians remaining on their land will be the people that are providing them with the infrastructure, the aid, the food, the water that they desperately need, and the infrastructure, for instance, to rebuild. I just want to say one final thing, right? As we were looking to Los Angeles and the wildfires that happened there in the Palisades, you saw major destruction, and people were incredibly upset over losing their personal belongings and their homes. But it was really about the community, right? The churches, the schools, the coffee shops in which so many of them convene. These Gazans have walked, marched, driven thousands of miles, right, back to their homes in North Gaza after this ceasefire to commune in rubble, because this is their homeland. This is where they want to remain. Not because of the structures in which they have lived in, Mika, but because of the community they have been surrounded by, the families and the people they know. And that, it seems, is something that is being lost by both the President of the United States along with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, Mika.
NBC's Yasmin Vasugian, thank you so much for your coverage live from Tel Aviv. We appreciate it. And before we go to break, Ali Vitale, just back on Capitol Hill, are you getting a sense from your sources, your contacts there, that especially Republicans, are they still standing behind this president, especially given the judgment on this issue? This judgment on this issue is potentially extremely dangerous.
There are clear ripple effects. Yasmin is talking about some of them. I do think that we're now getting a little bit of a clearer sense, too, of what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about when he said just a day or so ago, before meeting with Trump, that there was going to be conversations about remaking the map. It's a reminder of the long-standing and close relationship that Netanyahu and Trump have enjoyed over the course of these last many years. Condemnation of what we heard from the president there. But it strikes me, Lemire, and I want your take on this because we did the 2016 campaign together, when Tim Kaine talks about this being a deranged idea, but then also brings up nation building, hearkening back to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It strikes me that Trump, speaking so hawkishly, he talks like a hawk, but he doesn't always walk like a hawk. And he has made it a mission to pull troops out of American war zones. He was critical of the Iraq war. Does this strike you as seemingly out of step with the way that Trump has talked about potential use of U.S. military troops?
Yeah, on that 2016 campaign, he vowed to end the so-called forever wars. That he said that he tapped into the real frustration in the U.S. about the everlasting presence in Afghanistan and Iraq, although we should note that he did say that the U.S. went in. The mistake they made was they didn't take the oil. In this case, it seems like he's trying to take the beachfront property. Richard, this comes as a moment, though, where the Middle East is a seismic moment already, right? The aftermath of October 7th and that terror attack has left left Hamas devastated, Gaza in ruins. But Israel's counterstrike also took out Hezbollah and Lebanon. We've seen the collapse of Syria. We have seen Iran at its weakest moment in decades. There was opportunity here for a big move. I'm not sure this was that move.
I'm not sure this was that move at all, Jonathan. It takes Iran off the hook. And the funny thing, we've made ourselves the issue. We had a moment in the Middle East where Iran was on its heels. As you know, Assad was going from Syria, opportunities in Lebanon, first phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And what are we talking about this morning? Plans for the Middle East that are non-starters, unsatisfying, rejected by Palestinians, and could cause the destabilization of the throne in Jordan. So that's what we've done. We've changed the conversation in a way that doesn't make sense. We've made ourselves the issue. It's not clear to me why. Also, one other thing, and I think Yasmin was getting at it, in Israel, this will set a precedent. This sets the precedent of what's known as transfer. The answer to the Palestinian problem is not something that gives Palestinians a home of their own, but it denies them one. First Gaza, then the West Bank. This is a radical idea that the Israeli right will end with. This is not a peace process. This potentially sets in motion the end of what has been a peace process.
All right. And again, talking like a war hawk is one way of looking at it. What I heard was more like a developer of beachfront property with no sense or mention of the war-inducing side effects of this. We'll continue to cover this. There's much more still ahead on Morning Joe as the Trump administration looks to slash the federal workforce. We've learned tens of thousands of government employees are lining up to take a buyout offer. Plus, there's a new legal fight between the FBI and the Justice Department. We're going to dig into the two new lawsuits claiming agents are being targeted for retribution. And what exactly is Elon Musk doing, and why does he have so much power? We'll ask that question. Morning Joe is back in 90 seconds.
My eyes?
Dr. Asnari, thanks so much for joining us. What do you think about President Trump's ceasefire proposal that would have the United States taking over Gaza? How does that announcement help or hurt the talks you guys are conducting?
Brian, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on Fox and Friends. Obviously, we are now quite busy with preparing for phase 2 of the negotiations, which will start hopefully any day now, which will lead to a more sustainable truce that will hopefully lead to the phase when we can have the reconstruction of Gaza and sustainable peace in the region. And the Trump administration, since they were the transition team, were very instrumental in getting this deal across. As you know, Brian, if it wasn't for President Trump's assertiveness and President Trump's decisions before even assuming office, we wouldn't have had this deal that we are working on implementing right now. Obviously, the discussions of the post-war situation in Gaza vary. We have had a lot of ideas come from everybody, including the United States, and we value the partnership with the United States over the mediation. As you know, the U.S., along with us in Egypt, are the mediators and are the monitors of the implementation of the agreement. And therefore, these statements, along with others, are parts of a wider discussion over the post-war situation, which I think is not, no one player around the world can do it alone. This has to be an international effort led by countries like the United States in order for us to have sustainable peace in the region.
From all your experience of witnessing these talks, and of course Qatar played a big role within Afghanistan too, conducting these talks on both sides.
Asleep because you don't want to be embarrassed to admit that you'd been conned. Don't listen to anyone who says you should be embarrassed. You are always welcome aboard on the island of sanity. We'd love to have you here, and it's only going to get worse day by day.
Plan will be funded, and that it has failed to consider the consequences of mass resignations and how it may affect the government's ability to function. Some might say they have considered that, actually. We also learned the CIA is now offering those buyouts to some of its workforce. Under the offer, federal employees can resign and still receive roughly 8 months of pay and benefits, but some CIA workers, including those handling high priority tasks, will not be eligible. A spokesperson for the agency says Director John Ratcliffe is moving swiftly to ensure the CIA workforce is responsive to the administration's national security priorities. Meanwhile, FBI agents have filed 2 new lawsuits, pushing back against the Justice Department amid growing concerns about a Trump administration purge within the Bureau. The lawsuits allege agents are being targeted for politically motivated retribution after employees were asked to fill out surveys about their role in various January 6th criminal cases. The agents are calling for a judge to stop the publication of any list of employees who worked on those cases. NBC News has learned the FBI turned over a list of agents involved in January 6 cases to the Justice Department. It includes identification numbers instead of names. Let's bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian, who has been reporting on these lawsuits. So Ken, how many agents are suing, and what are the next steps? Can they keep their jobs in this environment?
Good morning, Nika. Well, that's the big question. Right now, there's about 9 or so agents suing anonymously in each one of these class action lawsuits, and the second one was also brought by the FBI Agents Association. But they say they represent a class of as many as 6,000 people who were involved with these January 6th cases. And I think one of the really interesting and important things that happened yesterday was more evidence of quiet resistance by the acting FBI leadership, including Acting Director Brian Driscoll, who was appointed by the Trump administration. You know, they were struggling over in recent days about whether they would even comply with this directive to provide the names to the Justice Department of all the agents and personnel who worked on January 6 cases. They thought it was inappropriate. But at the end of the day, their Office of General Counsel told them, look, this is a lawful order. We work for the Justice Department. We have to do it. But at the end of the day, he did not turn over a list of names. Now, he turned over employee numbers, and of course, the Justice Department can match those employee numbers with the payroll that they have at their disposal. But what they did by doing this was ensure that there is no master list of January 6 agents floating around that could be released, because that is the main allegation in these lawsuits and the thing they're most concerned about. They can't prevent the Justice Department from creating lists of employees who worked on particular cases. What they're concerned about is the release of the names. And what they say is, look, this is a retribution purge. It's very obvious based on the comments that members of the administration have made and that Donald Trump has made. And they said they're concerned that the real intent here is to release the names of these agents. They're already seeing some of these felons who were pardoned by Donald Trump who committed violence on January 6th posting the names of FBI agents on social media or on the dark web. And they say this is a major security concern. But stepping back, I mean, what hasn't happened yet is any firings beyond the 8 people, the 8 senior executives that we reported on a couple of days ago. So we're in a bit of a standoff right now. The FBI has managed to push back on what did seem like a plan for mass firings. Whether they will ultimately be successful remains to be seen, but it's a reminder that the FBI is not USAID. The FBI has leverage. Donald Trump needs the FBI. They're protecting this country from terrorist attacks. They're enforcing the law. And if they were to get rid of even a large number of the agents that were involved in January 6th, that is a huge part of the counterterrorism section of the FBI, the people that we most need at this moment when the threat from ISIS, and as you guys articulated in the last segment, is only rising, guys.
Coming up, we'll go live to Capitol Hill, where Republican senators are falling in line to back President Trump's cabinet picks. An update on where things stand today when Morning Joe comes right back.
We'll discuss is that there's been no deal with China which is a massive trade partner of ours. And the tariffs on China are now in effect, 10% tariffs, in addition to the tariffs that Donald Trump had already put into effect. And China is, of course, as we said they would, retaliating. And so they have come back with a series of retaliatory steps, including additional tariffs on liquefied natural gas, fossil gas. I'm not doing PR for the fossil fuel industry, coal, farm machinery, and other products from the U.S. It also said it's implemented restrictions on the export of certain critical minerals, many of which are used in the production of high-tech products. It's also launched an anti-monopoly investigation into Google, which, I mean, go ahead. They have a monopoly, so they probably should do that. But this is what's happening. We said they would do this, and they're doing it. So you're going to pay more for products coming from...
Last time, you, and this might be a little different, last year,
our stability, in our security, in our alliances, and that is what USA...
On to every thread of hope I had that God would save my house. I've lost everything. Pictures, memories.
You still.
Assume I'm a harmless old lady. Nobody sees me coming.
Hi, I'm Taylor Tomlinson, and there's a new After Midnight coming up next. Why? What have you heard?
After Midnight with Taylor Tomlinson.
RegretTheBet.org. A message from the Michigan Gaming Control Board.
Instant games from the Michigan Lottery. Fun to play, anytime. More excitement. Try our newest games with 195.
Tips that can help? Go to Don'tRegretTheBet.org. A message from the Michigan Gaming Control Board.
Welcome back, get it for Lewis Cato with the late show.
Enjoy. Type 2 diabetes, but I manage it.
Growth of your business. You can sync inventory and manage returns across all your sales channels, so you ship the right products to the right customers. Head to ShipStation.com to start your free trial.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. Joining us now is U.S. national editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce. He has a new piece titled "While Democrats Sleep." He writes in part, quote, "Trump is burning America's rule book. If he carries on like this, Democrats will have no choice but to send him a strongly worded letter. To claim that a minority party is too punch drunk to get its act together would be charitable." Not being parliamentary, the U.S. lacks an opposition leader to spearhead the fight back. The system's closest approximation, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, is following the rules of a vanished age. It's not as if Schumer is being outshone by colleagues. A few days after Trump's inauguration, Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, posted, "Presidents come and presidents go. Through it all, God is still on the throne." That is as may be, but fatalism has no track record of stopping revolutions. It's a bleak view that you give here, and it's one that makes this idea of Democrats lacking a message seem like a very quaint calculus of what's actually going on here within this party.
Yeah, I think, Ali, that we all, at some level in our brains, have the Sinclair Lewis novel, It Can't Happen Here, in our head. We have that sort of deeply ingrained complacency. And not only can it happen here, it is happening here. And I don't think that Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and other leaders, we've yet to see what Ken Martin will be like as a DNC chair. I don't think they've really taken that on board. Yesterday, Senator Minority Leader Schumer and Jeffries announced they'd have a Stop the Steal bill to prevent Musk from taking control of federal payment system. This is something that's already illegal, and it's a bill that would stand no chance of passing. So it's a kind of gimmickry that we'd have in a normal time of politics. This is a coup that's happening. It is happening here. It's happening now. Strategies based on winning the midterm elections 21 months from now could be completely hypothetical if they carry on at the speed they're going and with the intention they are signaling to us every single day. So I think this requires a far more radical and drastic sort of rethink of what the Democratic strategy should be.
Coming up, a live look at business before the bell. We'll get an update from CNBC on what's driving the day on Wall Street. Morning Joe is back in a moment.
Is your only vaccine?
Yes, from Sono Bello. After my pregnancies, my body just never got.
Watching you being taken out of the car by Chris Harris and company, where you just look like you were a little rag doll, and he's pulling you out. There he goes. This Chris had to be in the next segment. I couldn't take her over. I mean, I have a recommendation. You might want to use the door. Right. I mean, I'm going to tell Daytona how to do their cars, so they came up with doors and hinges. I think it's a safety issue. Yeah, Brian, you're going 200 miles an hour. I'm going to just open the door. They don't want. They're eliminating anything that could go here.
That was so funny.
It's you were worried you were going to split your hands. It is claustrophobic, let alone going up 200 miles an hour. Yeah. I'm more all of those guys now than ever. But I wouldn't wear a unitard. That's one of the reasons I don't race. That's right. Well, I want to go pro and have my house robbed, and I don't want to wear a unitard. So that's why I don't. Well, because the stuff would wind. How convenient would that be, though? Right, the car is right here, and the place where they were merchandised. Yeah, convenient theft. Indeed, more that way. The guy who actually pulled him out of the car is standing over by Carly right now, and there he is. Can I take a bow? Take a bow, Chris Harris.
It's at cncheat.com now. Ask him.
Today, there's a statement from the president of El Salvador that said, "We have offered the United States States of America the opportunity to outsource part of its prison system. We are willing to take in only convicted criminals, including convicted U.S. citizens, into our mega prison, CECOT, in exchange for a fee. The fee would be relatively low for the U.S., but significant for us, making our entire prison system sustainable. Does any of this sound like it benefits the American people? Does anyone think that this is remotely legal or constitutional or in line with any of the values I guess I naively thought that we shared as a country?
Export citizens
now,
to another
it
country,
have to be said, but deporting U.S. citizens isn't a thing you can do legally. But who's to say? I mean, the DOJ has already said that the court order putting a pause on his freeze of U.S. funding, they're just not going to follow it. So the executive branch has already said, we're not following what the judiciary says. So if they come out and say, maybe the SCOTUS says, hey, we don't want to cause a fuss, but you can't actually deport U.S. citizens to El Salvador. Maybe that's the end of the Supreme Court. Maybe he clears it out. Maybe they send a band of 18-year-old incels with Uzis, and that's the end of the SCOTUS. I don't know. I don't know what to expect tomorrow. But anyway, they're going to continue to accept Salvadoran deportees who illegally enter the U.S., but yes, also any illegal alien in the U.S. who's a criminal. They could be from gangs from other countries or whatever. In addition, and I'm sure many MAGA people will like that, if MAGA prisoners start getting deported, I hope that at that point they'll have a problem with it. And to be very clear, these prisons aren't great. You might have suspected that a mega prison in El Salvador might be kind of like a rough place. Yeah, no, they've been sites of near constant civil and human rights abuses. We can go into the details, but again, we're going to get to, the fact that migrant flights to Guantanamo have apparently begun. That's not a thing that's in a year. That's now. They're sending migrants to Guantanamo Bay. All of this, Adrian, feels like I kind of thought this would be the last dark line that would be crossed. But now, and to be fair, I never even hypothesized that they would deport U.S. citizens to El Salvador. But I don't know how to keep up with all of the uncrossable lines. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of the lines being crossed, and the thought that you would think, but the same thing with birthright citizenship, and this thought we're going to trim some fat off the Constitution. This whole thing of potentially moving U.S. inmates who are U.S. citizens to El Salvador is very scary. It's right out of Andor. But I would not be surprised to see it go down and to have the Trump administration totally blow off the courts, because that is authoritarianism. That's fascism. And they are exercising this playbook. And also, as we've seen in this country, people don't seem to care about inmates until they are one. And so the thought that people would actually fight and push back with the ardent fervor that they will of birthright citizenship is just not going to be the case. And then we're going to have a whole horde of individuals who are in another country and are not having their constitutional protections that they should be entitled to while in this country being protected and upheld.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with everything, and I really appreciate you reminding me that Andor Season 2 is coming later this year, and that's one of the only things I have to look forward to in these dark times. So thank you for that. Obviously, what constitutional rights would we expect as a U.S. citizen in a mega prison that holds 40,000 people in El Salvador? Okay, and by the way, I know that right-wingers will be I don't care if it's unconstitutional. It's probably only the lefties that will be sent there. And so as a lefty or whatever, as a critic of the Trump administration, a little bit of anxiety about this. But in theory, again, President AOC, President Whitmer could round up militia members. They're violent. They've committed criminal acts. It's hypothetical. Send them to El Salvador. Again, are these the roads we want to walk down as a society? And I ask, that's not a rhetorical question. MAGA, I'm asking you that. Do you want to be worried about being rounded up and shipped to Colombia or whatever if President Buttigieg decides to go in a dictatorial road? Is that what you want? Obviously they don't, and obviously they don't have any consistency. They don't expect that what they okay for Trump isn't going to be okay. It's utterly frustrating trying to get through to these people, grown adults who reason like goddamn toddlers. But anyway, this is utterly unacceptable. How is this not front pages of every newspaper? How is it even a possibility? Anyway, We could go again. Like we could give you the details. We don't have time. What do you know? There's starvation, lack of sanitation, lack of potable water, ventilation, temperature control, lighting. There are no visits. There are no programs for reentry into society. No workshops. No educational programs. Massive overcrowding. Obviously, massive violence as well. You would have a very good likelihood of being murdered. Do we need to go through all this? All this is the most obvious stuff in the world. I'm assuming John Oliver will cover it later on this weekend or something.
John, I will say that I would almost think to some extent that it's less likely to happen just because of the prison industrial complex here in the United States and the money that's generated from that. But I could see them sending individuals who are in max facilities and that are isolated pretty much 23 hours out of the day being sent down there because they can't necessarily make as much money off of them. But the prison labor here in the U.S. will definitely spike.
This conversation forward instead of just having you said, she said, you said, conversations.
Yes, Mo, let's take a look at a clip from the show where your character discusses recently being detained.
Today's event is part of a national effort where protesters are planning to rally at state capitals around the country. Ashley Elkins' ex-boyfriend is due in court this morning. DeAndre Booker is now charged with killing Elkins. The mother of two from Warren went missing in early January. Police say evidence found at Booker's apartment links him to the case. There could be charges in the wake of that deadly fire in West Bloomfield Township that killed a 16-year-old girl and her two younger brothers. Tuesday, police executed a search warrant at the may be handed over to the prosecutor's office for review. We're working to learn more about the student accused of stabbing a classmate during a fight at Avondale High School in Auburn Hills Tuesday morning. Police say two boys, 16 and 15, were fighting when the 16-year-old allegedly stabbed the other teen with a pocket knife. The 15-year-old was not seriously hurt. School officials are now reviewing security measures to find out how a weapon got into the building. Fans who stayed up late last night for the Red Wings game against Seattle are probably waking up tired, but at least they're happy. The Wings beat the Kraken 5-4 in a shootout. Right now, let's check in with Troy for our next weather forecast. Good morning, Troy.
Good morning, Chris. We have a brand new winter weather advisory in effect for some of our counties to the south, including some central counties. That's going to be Wayne, also Washtenaw, and Lenawee, as well as Monroe. This goes from 10 o'clock tonight until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning because of the chance for freezing rain leading to ice up to about a tenth of an inch before it's all over with by around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So overnight tonight, early tomorrow, dealing with ice.
I'll be back out in a little bit, and
we'll even areas just north of that advisory. Today,
go for a walk.
To a high of 28 degrees with cloudy skies, a little bit of light snow as we get into around 6 o'clock. Not leading to any big issues. That's 6 o'clock this evening, but it's really overnight tonight and early tomorrow when we track that chance for sleet and freezing rain, especially for central and southern counties. The counties I just mentioned in the advisory, including Wayne County down south into Monroe and back over into Lenawee County. You can see by 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, we see that chance for some sleet and some freezing rain, even a little bit of snow accumulation in our northern
Elon try to deport you.
Most of the issues
if the car starts driving without you or without me, then start barking really loud, and I will come out and stop that from happening. You gonna keep an eye on our Jethro?
For tomorrow. So again, the snow, the sleet, the freezing rain overnight
tonight, guys.
For early tomorrow
See you.
morning, and then a high of 40 for Thursday. More snow though, Chris,